Buenas tardes, gracias por la invitación. It's a great pleasure being here and present some thoughts about Austrian macroeconomics. Some say it is a contradiction in terms to have Austrian macroeconomics, but there are macroeconomic problems. Surely inflation, mass unemployment, economic growth. So macroeconomic problems exist, and microeconomics goes quite far in explaining.
Un instante, aquellos que no escuchan la traducción habría que conmutar al otro canal, ese es el problema. Aprieten canal 1 o canal 2, perdón.
But after a certain point, we need some kind of aggregation. And this is unfortunately the case, but there is no way out of this problem. And what probably Austrians try is not to exaggerate this aggregation, as it is in the case with Keynesian economics, and even more so in monetarism, where all the major problems almost seem to disappear. My talk is about capital, time preference, and entrepreneurial action, and the paper is posted on my site, Continental Economics. So those who would like to have a look at the paper itself, it's already written, can find it at this site. The paper here serves as a complement to the modern versions of capital-based macroeconomics. The first step was taken by Garrison, and by developing an approach that links features of standard macroeconomics with Austrian economics. So it's impure, so to speak. And the main focus is to explain economic growth, because economic growth is the center of all problems, including unemployment, poverty, and so on. What is included, and I would like to draw the attention to the point, entrepreneurial action. It's not business, it's not emprendedorismo, as it's very popular to call it in Brazil, for example, but it's entrepreneurial action as a form of human action, and the center, so to speak, of the actor of the model that I try to establish is a business, is a firm, is a company. So the company has acting properties, well, as it is the case with a juridical figure, with its own personality, a juridic personality. And so when we include entrepreneurial action, we include also expectation and imagination, and which is an important part that is left out in conventional macroeconomics. Hayek once wrote, quote, "It is probably no exaggeration to say that every important advance in economic theory during the last 100 years was a further step in the consistent application of subjectivism." And I think this is a very important starting point to redefine capital. Once it is recognized that capital is heterogeneous, a subjectivist approach to capital and roundaboutness is warranted. Otherwise, I cannot define capital other than as a monetary concept. Capital in terms of real productive units find their unity in the mind of the entrepreneur, of the company. It does not exist outside of the mind. It is a tool of human action. And this is a huge gap of this approach compared to conventional macroeconomics. The subjectivist perspective leads to a view of the economic process that is fundamentally different from the objectivist position. The objectivist position must define capital as homogeneous. There's no other way out. And from there you eliminate imagination and you eliminate the entrepreneurial action. There are variant meanings of capital, just to see how complex the issue is. When you look at the literature, there's capital as financial capital, very often used. Capital as a production good, but the problem is capital actually are production goods. So many models just have one production good, which is absolutely nonsense. You have, of course, capital as a stock. You have capital as a production process, capital as a factor of production or productive, and capital as a productive force in some approaches. And when we go to capital theory, we have likewise an immense divergency of approaches. We have heterogeneity versus homogeneity. We have whether capital is structured or is some kind of unit. We have the idea whether it's a production process, more Austrian, or whether it's a fixed stock. We have another problem which is very serious, in how far the factors of production are separate, or in how far they need to be coordinated. And what's the problem of coordination, which needs the entrepreneur? Yeah, it is very important. What does a company do? A company brings the two factors of production, or three or four factors of production together. Another problem is the permanence or non-permanence. If you define capital as financial capital and put it in a bank, it grows. But real capital suffers from depreciation. And you have this approach whether you have the entrepreneur in the system or you don't have it in the system, in the model. There are these two concepts of capital, and just a short look what traditional economics does. You have basically the variables capital itself. I have to say something more about that later on. This small d delta is depreciation. You have a rate of depreciation that brings down capital, so to speak, and that must be replenished by investment. Now, that's a basic point of a steady state, where the depreciation reduces the stock of capital and needs to be replenished by the adequate amount of investment as a flow that replenishes the stock, so to speak. And this investment depends with a certain savings rate, the small s, on income. And you have a production function which includes labor capital and technological progress. No? And when you exclude technological process, you have diminishing marginal returns, and it's basically technical progress that moves the economy towards growth. And nobody really knows what this technical progress really is, how it works, where it comes from. Yeah, there have been many efforts in mainstream economics to include it, to expand it, yeah, but still the models are inconsistent and incomplete. And so there's a great chance for the Austrians, so to speak, to jump in and offer at least a step forward. Characterizing classic conventional economics, macroeconomics, that it is represented in the major textbooks. One can say by neglecting capital, modern mainstream macroeconomics has lost its access to discern one of the most fundamental problems of the business cycle and of economic growth, the build-up of malinvestment in the excessive boom and the rebalancing or re-coordination of the capital structure in the bust, and the problem that how the mechanism, let's call it mechanism with some caveat, the so-called technical progress, or just I prefer economic progress, moves forward. For what we can learn from Menger is that as in the business world, and this is totally locked out of the mainstream, we have to deal with causal relations. Rereading the book by Menger, I was amazed how often he speaks about causality and a term that has moved away out of physics, for example, nowadays. And in economics, you speak a lot about correlations. Nobody tries to denote causality. Be the world as it is on the level of microphysics or something like that. But the practical reality, the praxeological approach, yeah, that we take calls to respect and to detect and to adhere and to find out about causal relations. And these causal relations, it's quite old-fashioned how we do our business, has exactly the time relation. I do something now and expect some result later on. It's old-fashioned in terms of some epistemological approaches or modern sciences, but that's how you do business. And that's the entrepreneurial vision. The entrepreneurial vision is to move in business, and what we do in business, improvement. We don't do technical progress. What's being done is economic progress, some kind of economic progress. It can just be a rearrangement. It does not need this kind of manna falling from the sky that drives to. So this idea of technical progress is very much exaggerated and also misguides public policies. They think that the economic progress comes from the universities doing basic research and so on. That's part of it. But the major concern is on the level of the business. Now we know the famous Hayekian triangle as a starting point. So at the horizontal line we have the stages of production. Yeah, and businessmen do something here at this level of the stages of production to bring about some consumable output which contains value. And of course, the closer some product is to the consumable point, the more valuable it is. Now, some grain has a value, but the bread in the hand is much more valuable. And this is so. We have this move of the stages of production. Let's say plant the corn, harvest the corn, move it to the factory, bake the bread, and then so on. And this is the causal relationship with time, in time. Now, this is not chronological time. You can simply do stages. Yeah? You can say the first stage was infinity, since the beginning of the earth. Yeah, because the semen has got some word, or it does not matter. What does matter that the ground is there and you can plant. Yeah, so have one stage. So time does not, for the business person and calculating, so it's important. But for our problem here, we can leave that, the duration of the individual stages, can leave that out. And it's important to see that the valuation process works the other way around. Yeah? So let's say the SP1, the value of SP1, has not a value in itself, not an intrinsic value of itself. The land has value only insofar it can produce bread. So the arrow of value is the counter arrow to that. So far, what's known, so far the context, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about, let's call it a step further, or suggestion, what Austrian macroeconomics could contribute. What is roundabout production? This famous term, roundaboutness. The original German is Umwegproduktion. It's almost today a detour. Instead of direct production, you detour it. Well, detouring it by producing a capital good. And what's the point in doing that? The point in doing that is that there is a certain standard production, and I know that I can produce this product, yeah, in step by step, yeah, and get at this point for a standard production. Now, when I embark upon roundaboutness, I will do that only as a company when the end result will be higher than standard production. So roundabout production, this Q final output that I produce must be higher or of better quality. Now, when I embark upon, I leave standard production and I go into Umwegproduktion, roundabout production, I fall behind standard production for quite some while, for drastically quite some while. No? So a simple example would be, I can walk a certain way to get a certain food in the countryside, a certain tree where they grow bananas or something like that. And that's standard production. I go there and I get it in time, at a certain time. Now I say, well, it's not very pleasant to walk. I will construct a bicycle. Of course, any other means, or try to find a horse. So this will cost me a lot of time. For quite a considerable time, I'm below standard production. And anybody who adheres to standard production is for a while at least better off. And I carry an immense risk that my plan could eventually fail, because nothing is certain. I expect a higher productivity, but the whole thing is connected with immense risks. So, one point is, what is my quantity or my rate of time preference? RTP is rate of time preference. If my rate of time preference is 0, I save all I have. And if my time preference is 1, for example, or I save nothing. Now this can be seen as a point where I have a certain rate of time preference, this point E, where my time preference tells me how long I'm ready to wait, or even more so, and this is very important, how much I can wait. Yeah, we like to interpret time preference psychologically, but it's subjective in one way, but also it's subjective in terms of what I have. If I have more stuff, I can wait longer than when I have less. Now this must be the break-even point. Yeah. So I can only wait in so long or so far, in congruence with my time preference, that I can cover the superiority of standard production over roundabout production. Now the time is going forward, but just keep this a little bit short, although it's one of the main parts, but those interested can look it up in the now when the central bank intervenes, it is as if our time preference has become lower, our rate of time preference, and it deceives all the businessmen about the real availability of resources. And it makes something very interesting. Yeah? Of course, that's in the standard literature, that businesses will fail and so on. But what it does not say, what is the contribution here, it makes that standard production will survive. It eliminates the innovative business. It innovates the business